So before we start today's video, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you guys at home. A very large thank you to the guys over on Patreon for helping us out each and every month. Because of all of your support, I am now announcing that there's going to be videos on Tuesday. Those videos will not interfere with our Friday Completionist or Top 10 lineups. We're bringing back 3 shows that we will switch out every week. Why We Love Gaming, Stories Through Gaming returns as our interview podcast show that features different YouTubers and their personal connections to games. The Completion Bonus, a how-to guide on how to complete certain aspects of games, both new and old. And the fan favorite, Defend It, will be making a return for its second full-fledged season. I hope you guys enjoy these videos as they come. Now, on to the top 10. Just like today, the console wars was an actual thing that many people back in the day experienced. Many people were split. Are you a Nintendo kid or are you a Sega guy? And when PlayStation threw their hat into the ring, things got even crazier. And while Sega focuses solely on software now, the Sega Genesis back in the day at the time was something to remember. Here's a story I have for you guys. I physically own less than 4 Genesis games. When I was a kid, I actually had a Genesis and I loved it so very dearly. However, I went through some hard financial times many years ago, and I had no choice but to sell all of my Genesis games. Never got around to it, but I've been meaning to rebuild my collection.
You know what's crazy, Gerard? I had almost exactly the same experience. I had to sell mine too.
So with that said, here's my top 10 Sega Genesis games of all time. Some of these games, while I didn't play them when I had a Genesis, have been ported through various virtual console and digital stores across many consoles. And as always, the disclaimer, this list is clearly my opinion, and I welcome yours in the comments below. Remember folks, according to advertisements, Sega did what Nintendo don't.
Number 10!
Alright, so this game is kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. I'm not the biggest fan of horrible movie tie-ins or games that are ported to every single console, but there was a bit of charm when it came to the Super Nintendo, NES, and Genesis ports. Some were made with the right amount of care, this one without the care, but it was still somewhat fun. Jumping into the world of Jurassic Park in this game is disappointing, but it's still a good time.
Not nearly as disappointing as the Jurassic Park DOS game. It was like a million floppies.
Between playing as both the Doctor and a Raptor, you get 2 unique experiences of gameplay that ultimately make you feel like 1 second you're hunting, the next you're being hunted. Is the gameplay great? Well, at least the Raptor is. It's fun. Dr. Grant? Not so much.
Number 9!
So from our Aladdin review of the Capcom SNES game, I made a bold statement by saying the SNES version was superior to the Genesis version. After replaying both of them recently, I still stick to my decision that I like the SNES version a little bit more, but I'll admit, the Genesis version holds up. And what's even funnier is that I owned this game and not the Super Nintendo version. I need to give it more credit where credit's due. The animations in the Genesis version are way closer to the actual cartoon, considering they had a ton of help from Disney animators. The music is pretty solid, and fun fact, this is one of the top-selling games on the Genesis. And this game is relatively difficult. Aladdin was a huge film, and so was this game. After replaying it, I kind of want to revisit it and give it a fair review. What do you guys think? If you want me to go back and revisit Agrabah, tweet at me, #GoBackToAgrabah.
Agging him. Number 8!
Echo the Dolphin, in my opinion, is one of those really hard games for kids. It definitely doesn't hold your hand, the enemies are pretty brutal, and it's kind of unclear as to what Echo can actually do. Moving blocks with your nose or shooting things with your sonar beam thing to get things done, this game feels really open as the Big Blue Sea.
It always made me think of Flipper.
Faster than lightning.
But overall, the biggest thing I love about Echo is that it's incredibly tranquil. There's something about swimming in the Big Blue Sea and the music that's playing, it gives me this chill vibe. I'm totally down with it. I haven't played this since I was a kid, but I remember it being really difficult.
Davin.
Toe Jam and Earl is weird. It's one of those classic games that, in my opinion, hasn't aged as well as I remembered. I'm sure you all have experienced a few games like that. Having a single player and co-op mode, this game's satirical take on the 90s is pretty spot on. These two aliens don the hip-hop backwards hat attitude of the 90s. The roguelike dungeon crawler vibe is very apparent here. The strongest asset ToeJam and Earl still has going for it is its soundtrack. Genesis games generally had a pretty great bass line, and ToeJam and Earl is no exception.
Dude, if you love that music, you should check out this live rendition of it. Number 6. Really? Sonic Spinball?
Sonic Spinball is brilliant. The soundtrack is fantastic. Sure, it may not feel like a full-fledged Sonic game, but any Sonic fan would love it. You travel from stage to stage via a pinball machine, with Sonic himself being the ball. Launching yourself into bumpers has never been this fun before. With Sonic being the ball, he also has limited movement when he's recovering from a death or if he's in a secret area, giving the illusion that Sonic is much more controllable. After collecting the Chaos Emeralds, of course you'll have to battle the infamous Dr. Robotnik at the end. This game's pretty tough.
I'm pretty sure you could say that most Genesis games are tough, and you'd be clear.
Well, that's kind of true. Older games, especially those that came out on the Genesis, were generally fairly difficult.
Number 5.
Oh, Gunstar Heroes. This one we already reviewed on the show with special guest Proton John, and when we were deciding on what game to complete, Proton John insisted that we play this game because I never had before, and boy am I bummed that I waited so long. This game has still got it. 4 super diverse massive stages, really challenging but rewarding boss fights, enough power-up combinations and hand-to-hand combat moves, with a dash of run and gun and stop-and-shoot controls. Gunstar Heroes has got it all. Except maybe a clear story, but hey, it's super freaking fun. Let's play it again sometime soon, John.
Come back to us, Mr. Willis. Number 4.
Comic Zone has been a game that I've been messing around with more recently, and I can honestly say it's a visual barrage of fun. I think this does comic book superhero games better than most of those comic book superhero games.
You just... what?
Oh, this beat 'em up is so freaking rad. Whenever you've cleared the panel by beating the crap out of whatever stands in your way, you launch yourself into the next comic book panel, and there are several moments where you can choose a different path, sometimes leading to secrets. The sad thing about Comic Zone is that it came out very late in the life cycle of the Sega Genesis, so a lot of people didn't get to really play it. You can download it on various digital marketplaces, or at the very least buy a physical copy for relatively cheap.
Support your local game store. Number 3.
I feel that Konami was one of the few third-party companies that understood how to develop for the Super Nintendo and Genesis separately. After playing Symphony of the Night, I wanted to get more Castlevania in my life. While I haven't played 2 or 3, I conquered Super Castlevania 4, and I just still wasn't done yet. But then I found out that there was a Genesis title called Castlevania Bloodlines, and this one was really fantastic. It's incredibly underappreciated, and it has one of the best soundtracks in the Castlevania series. For a Genesis game, the sound effects aren't piercing to the ears, and the platforming is on point and direct. Definitely gotta be one of my top favorite Castlevania games, let alone Genesis games of all time.
Number 2.
Rocket Knight Adventures is actually the most recent thing I played on this list, and holy god, I can't believe I waited this long to play it. The platforming is just so much fun, and the use of the jetpack charge and the relative speed of the game is just so good.
I think the dudes over at Yacht Club Game must have taken some inspiration from this for Shovel Knight.
It's got this Mega Man meets Joe and Mac 90s platformer feel going for it, and it's great. Konami, killing it as always, made a sequel to this game as well as an individual SNES game to go with it. I think it's safe to say, if there's another Genesis game to review next, it's gotta be Rocket Knight Adventures.
The ultimate number 1!
Admit it, there were a few of you out there that were genuinely concerned if there would be a Sonic game on this list, and that Sonic game on this list is in fact my number 1. Sonic 3 with the Sonic and Knuckles pack. Sonic 3, in my opinion, was the best version of any Sonic game to date. The level designs are genius, the music is great, the power-ups are awesome, and the bonus levels are challenging and nauseating.
Uh-oh, here we go again. Yeah!
A few months after its release, we saw the Sonic & Knuckles add-on pack introduced, and boy oh boy did it make Sonic 3 so much better. More stages, playing as Knuckles, and the Master Chaos type emeralds were introduced, providing you got all 7 Chaos Emeralds from before. We reviewed this game in the early stages of the Completionist, and we researched the heck out of it on Super Beard Bros. Needless to say, this is the most important Sega Genesis game to me, and so many others out there.
What have you done with our precious Sonic? Come back!
So that's my top 10 Genesis games. Let me know what your top 10 is in the comments below. A huge shout out to our sponsor for today, Audible. Audible.com/that1 will get you a free 30-day trial and a free audiobook. Right now I'm listening to, or reading, listening, whatever you want to call it, this book called The Name of the Wind, The King Killer Chronicle Day 1. It's about this, awesome badass hero that lives a life as an innkeeper, and he retells his entire life story in the course of 3 days. It's a trilogy, and this is the first day. So if you guys like Lord of the Rings, that kind of crazy ass fantasy stuff, I definitely recommend it. You should check it out. Now, if you excuse me, let's go play some Comic Zone, cause damn, that game is awesome. I'm gonna go beat some dudes up. Let's go beat up a dude. You want to beat up a dude? Don't beat up a dude. That's not nice. Let's go beat up some 90s thugs. Those kinds that you see in a 90s commercial that are like, hey kid, don't do drugs. And then you're like, no, and you beat them up. Those are the kind of guys I want to beat up.
The guys on motorcycles.
Every guy that rides a motorcycle by our place, I want to beat up. That's who we're going to go beat up. 90s beat up style. I'm going to go watch TMNT. The old one, not the new one.